Hi, I'm Karen Novovieski, and I am your program manager for the Defense Media Awards. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are going to be going over Graphic Designer of the Year, and I have two of our judges joining us here in the studio. One of our judges, unfortunately, was not able to make it. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca McElhatton. I am the Senior Designer and Production Coordinator here in Baltimore for shop Alpha Graphics. We have been around for quite some time, and I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent.
I'm Craig Bowman. I graduated from Ringling College of Art and Design, and I work at Full Sail University, and I have my own company called Red Six Studios for the past 10 years or so.
Excellent. Well, welcome to both of you, and thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it. So I guess one of my first questions for you both is, after going through the packets that we sent you, what were your kind of overall feelings about the work that you were seeing?
I mean, personally, I thought everything was wonderful. Such a great opportunity, and it was so nice to see the ways that graphic design can be incorporated, into this specific atmosphere. So it was just, it was really neat to see the way that those designers used the skills they had to create those pieces.
Wonderful. Craig?
I thought it was very interesting that there was a wide range of information that was being communicated, from very technical to just pieces that were kind of honoring people of service or divisions. Groups of people that were working in the community and whatnot. So that was nice to see the diversity, I think, of the pieces that were presented.
Excellent. Well, I tell you what, let's jump right in and take a look at the first group of entrants. So we are doing this by entrant. We're not going to talk about who they are, and only one person at this point knows who all the winners are. That would be me. So, but we're going to jump in, and what do you guys think?
I thought the design was really solid. It gives a nice sense of form. I would have liked to have seen a little bit of the metal type of look, maybe in the background graphic a little bit, just to tie it a little bit stronger together. But the lettering's really clear. The soccer at the bottom reinforces, the text and the font that was selected. I thought worked really well. It had a very angular kind of feel to it, which goes along with the armor and the strength, and so, less maybe friendly and organic, but it's still appealing to people. It doesn't push you off. And the thing that I liked a lot about it as well is that kind of design will work really well in a graphic for like a t-shirt or a banner or a business card, right? Because if you can't see or read it or recognize that imagery and very small, then you're going to be in trouble probably, as a graphic. So
Yeah, I agree. I looked at this one, and one of the things with logos is they need to be able to be used over a wide range of materials. Sometimes that gets lost in logo design pretty frequently. So I would agree here. I can see this being used over a range of materials, which is great. It's a good understanding of the use of the piece. Again, limited colors makes it very easy to reproduce in different ways, but it's also a good use of space, and a nice use of color without going overboard. And then one of the other things, like was mentioned, it's very clear to see what's trying to be accomplished, that it's for soccer, it's for a soccer team, so definitely a very, very good option here.
I even like the direction that the knight is looking as well. It kind of feels like it's looking over the shoulder, but when we read from left to right, our eye starts in that top, left corner, in that area. So we pick up the knight like right away. I think it catches your eye immediately. Yeah. So you get a sense of what the mascot is, and then it falls right into the text, which is a good flow, overall.
Yeah,
so
totally agree.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next piece of the portfolio. Okay.
I remember this one.
What do you guys think?
I feel that this one actually was a little bit, it's because of the dirt layer and the grime that's involved, it makes it edgy feeling, but it actually kind of clouded the imagery for me when I looked at it. In the text, the aim, I think it says aim high on the top there. I think because I'm familiar with that, with the Air Force as a brand, you know, that I caught it, but I don't know if someone looking at it that wasn't maybe as familiar with it would recognize the text, be able to read it as easily. So maybe a different type of font for the top would work better. And then maybe a little less grime towards the center of the imagery so that the players in the bottom and the centerpiece would maybe be a little bit cleaner. You know, you can still keep the dirty feel around the edges, but it'll help and that would most likely actually help focus the attention into the center, which I think is the main theme anyway, was that especially with the eyes darting out at you and looking at you, so.
Yeah, I think I really liked this piece because I think it was explained that it was a motivational poster, and this is a style that we see pretty frequently in the shop. That these motivational posters. I liked the grunge. I like that kind of dirty feel, even though it does take quite a bit of work to make it look dirty. Mm-hmm. I like the use of, again, those simple colors, highlighting what you want. Like was mentioned, I would say my major downfall for this was the typography. I kind of wanted to see maybe something hand lettered to keep with that grunge. The lettering just seems a little bit too uniform. And then depending on the size for production, the text at the bottom is a little bit small.
I would agree.
So overall, though, I really like the feel of this piece. I definitely got that, that motivational poster feel from it. Really got through to me.
I think it's going in the right direction. I think with some tweaks, it would just pop more and work really well, especially like you're saying with the text and stuff. So.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to our next graphic.
I remember this one too. I really liked this one a lot. I like the way that the zombie in the center with the U and where it says run. I really like that kind of graphic incorporated into it. The lettering was really clear. It's easy to read. It would be recognizable from a distance on a t-shirt. And if it was pulled down into something smaller, like a letterhead or something like that, that it would read, well, and it would look good. So I liked the design of this. It's simple, and it looks like just black all the way through, so it'd probably be, economic to print as well, if you're trying to reproduce it in mass numbers and stuff.
So is this something, when you look at something like this and you realize this is going to go on a t-shirt, it's going to go on graphics for posters, it'll go on a number of different mediums, is this something that works for all of those mediums? Can you see a place where it may not?
No, I think because it's a one color imprint, I think it's going to work across the board. The problem that you may run into, because there's a lot of that splatter detail, when you make it smaller, that is going to be lost. But that happens quite frequently, that whenever we take an image or a logo, or something like this, and make it smaller for reproduction, sometimes we automatically take out some of those finer details and leave the more detailed version for larger production. So you may lose some of the detail, but it's not that is unheard of. So I think you would be good across the board with that one.
Yeah, I don't think it would affect it. If you got some of the splatters out of there, it's not going to affect the overall design, at all, because the text is communicating a lot. I think I like this one.
Excellent. Next slide, next graphic. Okay. Craig?
I remember this one too. It's like the first thing that came to my mind when I first saw it was just the simplicity of it. And I really like, it's easy to get carried away when you're adding too many details and things because you're an artist and you're trying to put in the, your best, and you get caught in the little minutia of things. And keeping things really simple goes a long way. And one of the reasons is production-wise, it's easier to produce in some cases. For the viewer, it's easier to decipher, as long as you have enough information. Mm-hmm. The thing that caught me was the text on the side. Like I immediately saw the trail through the center. I thought that was really strong, and it immediately pulled my eye to it. After my eye went up, looking through the piece, I realized that, there's text on the side. And so the text just being it's clean and it's simple, but it's very small. And so if this went, into a banner for, an ad on maybe a website or something like that, that would start to get really hard to see. So that would have to be adjusted maybe. I would have liked to seen the text be maybe a little bit larger so that you can see it. But if you go too large, then it takes away from the design element, which is the center focus, I think. So there's a balance there. Maybe a little bit larger, but not too large. But I like the simplicity of it. I thought it was effective in that way.
Yeah, I really liked this one for the simplicity. One thing I think that I had mentioned for this was the print production on this would be a little bit more difficult. The gradations and that very fine detail, it may look like there's not a whole lot going on graphically, but that gradation can be very hard to reproduce. So you're looking at it on the screen and it's beautiful. That's not necessarily what it's going to look like when it prints. So that would be the hurdle with this piece, is how it's going to be used.
Or the medium changed that quite a bit, like whatever type of print you were going to?
Oh yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. We could certainly print this very, very large, and it would probably turn out a lot better.
Okay.
But digitally printing may be a little bit more difficult, or a few more rounds of proofs before you got that right.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, next graphic.
I remember this one too. I really like the circle, the kind of design, the oval kind of on a side, circles on the side kind of thing. It gives it some depth to the piece, where you feel like that there's a little bit more of a foreground and a middle and a background type of element. The thing that caught me was that the gray in it kind of is almost too close to the black. You lose, I think, the power of that element because it's just too similar. There's not as much contrast. So I think I suggested, if I remember correctly, maybe more of a white to gray, so that it would push that depth more and give a sense of this, maybe more of a vastness, that this is happening in. And that would be, I think, a little bit more visually catching, and pull people's eyes to it. I thought the text worked relatively well. It didn't need to be necessarily a part of the main design, in my opinion. And then the small text down at the bottom. I know there's a lot of information that needs to be put on it. That's a difficult thing to do, especially when you're listing a lot of things. So the concern would be just how big would this be? Like, being put out. Is it on a page? Is it a poster? Is it on a graphic, on a web? And then that might be more difficult to decipher if that's a really, really important element, in it. But I liked it. I thought it was a little more, had a kind of a modern feel to it, but slightly retro, kind of thing. It's nice to see. So.
Yeah, I like that kind of retro feel, and I agree. I may have gone with a lighter gray. There's just not a whole lot of contrast there. So depending on the screen, depending on the mode of production, you're going to end up losing some of that. And then that much black, especially that much rich black, could be hard to replicate as well. I thought the logos were a little small. I might shout those out a little louder, but again, that
at the bottom,
in the
right?
bottom,
Yeah, I didn't
yeah.
even see that until you mentioned it. So.
So have a little more fun with those logos there, but I think it's a fun piece. I would agree that depending on the mode of production, certain things work and certain things may not.
Excellent. Next graphic.
Yeah, I remember this one. I really liked the colors in this and kind of defining. It feels somewhat balanced with the colors through the piece. They're not all kind of one area. And I remember a few others. I think that the colors identified certain pockets of information and graphics that go along with that, which is really nice. And this was the start of that. I thought it was really clean. It has a linear feel, but I don't think it needs to go past that. I think having just defined areas of graphic and information works well, especially for like the high school kind of thing and the information that was being listed. Giving some structure, the building basics, and then the 21st century design and the sustainability. It all was kind of organized well, and the flow seemed to be nice, so I liked it. And it would go well on a web page. It'd go well on a page, a brochure or an ad, type of thing. I thought that would work really pretty well. So.
I love infographics.
Yeah.
I'm like on an infographic kick right now. I love this kind of layout. There's definitely a huge need for it, and it's so hard to take, I don't want to say boring, but boring information.
Yeah.
And make it appealing to your reader. So it's really nice to see that functional layer of graphic design come together. And I think this does a really good job. Keeping the graphics simple, eye-catching, the reader can get through this quickly, and I really like this piece. I like infographics.
Yeah.
So
I agree. Today it's super important there's so much information. We have more access to information than we've ever had before, and it's interesting to see a lot of times that in having that access that sometimes people just don't utilize it because there's so much. So the need to be able to take a lot of information and put it into a simple form and then be able to direct a viewer through it, that's super, super important. And I geek out with the infographics too. I think they're super cool, especially if you can show visually like comparison of amount or size or, history, that kind of thing. Or the design flow of something, a process of something.
yeah.
That's really, really neat to be able to see visually.
And I can say these are the kinds of graphics that I'm asking for a lot of the work that we're doing here. My question is, and not so much a question as an observation, see if you all agree, being able to be handed a whole bunch of information and then distill it into a comprehensible communication period, and then to be able to take that and do this with it, how difficult is that?
Very difficult. This is, pieces like this are things that we do at the shop quite frequently in our design work. And we might start with 100 or 150 pages of information that we need to boil down. And with that, for our clients, there are rounds and rounds and rounds of revision, making sure that we've picked out the right metrics and that we've displayed them a certain way and that they are able to be used by that organization or agency. So there's a lot of work that goes into the back end of a piece like this.
Yeah. Who's going to be looking at it is super
Right.
important. Like if I was going to take information like this and put it into a graphic, which you're right, is very difficult. You have to have there's an abundant amount, and so you have to pick out the pieces that are most important, or how do you consolidate a certain amount of information into something that's easily recognizable. That's super important, but you also have to look at who's the target audience? Who's looking at it? What age group is it? Is there generational concerns? Is there regional concerns? There could be down even to color, what colors do you use in this, and what do they represent in those, regions? Is yellow a good color, or is blue a good color, or does, I'd say it's like, does it denote poison? I remember a case where there was a region that they used blue to kind of identify poisons in their environment. So when they were packaging, this particular company was packaging things, they used blue because they thought it was calming and it was, easy on the eyes, I guess, calming and kind of welcoming, to people. But to them, it was like, oh no, that's bad. So it just, out of a simple choice of color, actually communicated something entirely different than what they were intending. And it affected the consumer on that particular project. But I think information is the same way. Like what is used to catch your eye, and what's in the culture. I think that's important to kind of look at as well, especially with the graphics.
So something, when you look at this, it feels great, it looks great. You guys are the infographic nerds, if we will, in the room. I think what's important, as you just brought out, is to talk about how much work goes into the whole back end before you end up with a piece like this. Mm-hmm. And sometimes graphic artists and graphic designers make it look so easy. Yeah. And there's really a considerable amount of work that goes into it. So, awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Probably more, I'd say maybe even 80% of it is on that side. And then the execution of the piece becomes a lot easier once you have a clear understanding of what it is and it's been all boiled down into something that works.
Right, yeah, once you get your head around the data, that kind of allows you to come up with a plan on how you're going to present it. And sometimes the how you're going to present it comes very naturally, and the figuring out where these data points come from is 80% of the work. So
yeah, let the information serve the design, really. Kind of, let it. If you come up with design first, then you try to take all your information and pack it into that design, it may not work. I think understanding the other side first lends to what design you need to deliver that information, and that comes a lot easier than, that's not the hard part at all. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at our next design.
This one, I liked the imagery. I thought was very inviting. My eye went to the pictures first. We all like to look at pictures. We're all on Instagram and, looking at things. So that kind of jumped out. And I think the seal, the emblem up the top, as being part of the design, like the framework, I really kind of liked. It didn't feel like an afterthought. Like sometimes with logos and things like that are incorporated, it's almost like, oh yeah, we need this in the design. And so you have to kind of figure out, well, what do I do now? The design's already kind of working. So what do I, and they just stick it on there, right, because it has to be on there. But it feels then like an afterthought sometimes. So this felt like it was known that this was going to be a part of it. And it was part of that kind of initial idea. So the top half worked really well for me. The middle, I thought using the red really catches your eye. You typically commands your attention. And having that in the middle as a call, I think that was good, and it works. Below, it felt less design, and it's some basic information. It didn't work as strong for me. It was almost kind of like, well, by the time I got down to the bottom, it wasn't maybe as important, because I got the imagery, I got that, I got the tag in the middle, says, oh, we need help. And then my attention just kind of, off to the side. So bringing that design maybe further down into the bottom, bullet pointing, the list, I think I mentioned on the president, vice president, secretary, the positions that they're actually looking for, kind of thing. Maybe bullet pointing that or bringing it in so it's stronger, highlighting it, use a different color, different font, whatever may work for that, to help keep that simple flow where I don't have to decipher as much. I just get the important pieces in it that would finish it off. It would be easier to catch that and kind of leave with it. It's the last thing you see, so sometimes that needs to be the strongest thing. we catch the beginning and we catch the end, and the middle kind of gets in the wash sometimes, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this one, it kind of falls into that category of functional design. So it gives us a visual and the information that we need to get to know what we need to do and where we need to go. So it definitely serves that purpose. I do agree, though, that, you know, the bottom part of this with the who, where, when, I don't know for me if it was that teal green color is dark, but my eye kind of faded off on this as well. I do appreciate that the typography is clean. I can read it. It's large enough for me, which is, you know, sometimes hard to achieve when you're working with limited space. And I also liked the pictures. I think that's a nice thing, especially when you're looking for volunteers to show these are the things that we do. It's very eye-catching. So yeah, overall, I like this. Functional design has a very big place in the world. But I do wish that my eye was more drawn to those details.
And with the community kind of thing, or, you know, where there's people interacting with each other and working together, when you have imagery like that, there's always an emotional value to it. You know, people can relate to that. On the music side of things that I do, in addition to graphics, I'm trying to get more artists to actually say, I'll give you a deal on this t-shirt, my merchandise they're trying to sell. They don't usually make a lot of money on that, but I'll give you a deal on this. If you buy this, I'll give you so much off on this one, but you have to take a picture with me, and then you have to share it on your Instagram, kind of thing. And the reason being is because that emotional content, you know, the more imagery that an artist gets out there, especially a performance artist, that has a fan or somebody that they're interacting with that has a smile on their face with them, that goes a million miles. You know, that'll gain traction over time. It's like, I always see pictures of this person, and the people that are with them are always happy. Like, we gotta go check that guy out, you know, or that girl, and the performance. They look like they're having fun. You know, that's important. That's
all
really
the people
important.
here, the castle keepers, look so happy.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to go join them.
Yeah, so that's perfect. I thought that was excellent use of that type of stuff.
Excellent. All right, next graphic.
This one, I think, I saw that the imagery was used in a similar way, but it felt to me, for some reason, I don't know why, it just felt like the imagery it worked, but maybe not connect as much with what it is, the Public Service and Recognition Week. It's like I see the top left graphic, and I see some, you know, looks like they're planning or looking at some development stuff, and okay, I get that. The middle, there's two people together, but I don't know, is this a community outreach? Is it just two people that work together? Is it you know, I can't piece necessarily together what it represents, other than that it's a face and there's kind of a smile. And then the one on the right looks like development, but the people are so far away, I don't get that connection with the people. I see more of it's a development site. And so it's an image, but maybe not as strong as it could be for for public service, you know, and recognition. It feels, I just felt it could be tighter in that, and then it would work, I think, a little bit better for that.
This, this one just felt very disjointed to me. I don't feel like there's much drawing everything together. So I see the three pictures, there's some design element to it. I'm not sure why the background, you know, behind the words, I don't know why it's blue. I don't know if the star motif is something that's used in other places. So the pieces are there, I just am not sure how they connect and how all of that comes together. You know, aside from that, the typography is clean, the color is nice and bright. There's certainly a visual element. I'm just not quite sure where this would be used or kind of where it's going.
All right, next graphic.
This one it felt to me like it worked okay for what the goal is. You know, I didn't think it needed to be like super flashy. It didn't need to be like edgy. Didn't need to have a lot of necessarily design involved with it. I just think it needed to be clean and organized. What is this? Here's a face. He looks kind of like a cool guy. Been around for a while. Oh, yep, it's like 74. So this has been something that's happened and more of a recognition. It matches the Throwback Thursday idea, giving some information about somebody that served, and so I thought it worked okay. The graphics on the side, at the top, the logos, it's okay. You see them. They're not. They need to be there, but they're not a main design element. So being kind of up and out of the way is fine, you know, to me. The background image, I can see it looked like it was some design plans kind of things, and so that matches the engineer type of idea. If this was on a website or something like that, it would work fine, you know, as far as that kind of thing. If it went to print, you know, for a poster or something like that, I'd maybe want more design in it, you know, because if it doesn't feel like a call to come look at me, then people might just walk by. So it really would depend, for me, it would depend on what media is this going to. It may, and for what it was, been perfect, but it may need to change depending on what the end goal, you know, the needs are, I guess. For me, it's.
From the social media side of things, I think this works well. The colors are clean, it's very calm, it has a very clear purpose, put right on there, Throwback Thursday, I know exactly what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I do wish if there were different versions of these logos that could maybe be a one color, so a white or a black. I think that might have just tied in with that overall feel a little bit better, but again, I don't know if those exist, so.
Which colors were you talking about?
For the logos in the top
for the
corners,
logos, I
if
get
there
you.
were more limited color variations of those.
The one on the right's kind of hard. It's small. It's kind of hard to actually see it. You get the letters, but you don't get any of the imagery in it. So,
Right.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, it really nails its purpose. The colors there, the words are perfect. Typography is very clean, easy to read. So for social media, I think this is great. For another type of production purpose, I think it would need more. So just depending on how that's used, I think it's really nice.
I don't know if it was a design thing or not, but I kind of dug the white letters on the blue because it just reminded me of like a Unix scripting, you know, screen, like an engineering kind of feel, or a reverse blueprint, you know, an actual blueprint kind of feel, which goes along with the engineer type of feel. It could have been a design thing. It could have been a happy mistake. I don't know, but I thought it was kind of cool. You know, that was more of an afterthought. I don't think it really jumped out to me, but I kind of chuckled later. I was like, I wonder if that was kind of designed in there or not. You know, you don't know. But
lots of happy mistakes in design.
Yeah, and if you get them, take them. Work with them. You know, they're not. It's if you do it, if it happens once, it's a happy mistake. If you take that and utilize that as part of the design, and maybe another place or two other places, now it's a design element. You know?
Own it.
So yeah,
Own it.
Take
Awesome.
it and run with it. That's inspiration comes that way sometimes. You know, you're just like, I didn't plan that, but it happened. So, but I like it. So what can I do with that? And that can help you kind of move things.
So being able to kind of take the blinders off sometimes from the this is what I have to do, and allowing a little more inspiration to come in, even though it may not have been the direction that you initially thought.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Happen a lot?
All the time.
Oh yeah, sure. Especially in some of the media that I deal mostly with is animation. You have an idea and a plan, you work weeks on it, and it's kind of working, but then you realize it's like something's not working right, and what's going on? And you take a step back for a minute so that you can at least work with a fresh eye. And I'm a big proponent of that, like work smaller stints more often than working one long stint on something, because we're all creative people and we know what it should look like, or, you know, we're biased to it because we have all the information, but the viewer doesn't. So when we look at something for so long, things just start to wash together. They start looking more like what you think they should look like, than what it does. And taking that step back or getting another set of eyes is really important because they don't know. They're seeing it for the first time, so it either works or it doesn't. And if there's a problem, that'll at least help identify areas to work on or go to. And that refocuses you, and that's really, really important to do. Take your inspirations, run with them, let them happen. Don't get too married to your idea either, because you might take that one thing out, and then everything else falls into place, and it works at that point. And that one thing may have been the thing that started the whole idea. And you just have to make the sacrifice for the whole, the end result, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, anytime I kind of get my design brain going, I certainly have to take a lot of little breaks and maybe walk away from my desk for a little bit or put a project aside to work on again the next day. And sometimes you go back the next day and you look at it and start changing 10 things.
Yeah.
And then it really takes off, even though the day before you thought you had it right.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that, don't be married to it, be willing to make changes and see where it goes. And sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does. And you learn to work with that flow a little bit.
And then, of course, that's all relative to the designer as well, correct? Like
Sure.
sometimes you need many breaks, sometimes you need 4 or 5, sometimes, but that becomes your flow and your process, correct?
Sure,
Kinda?
I think it's super important. I mean, you have to go what feels natural to you. You also have to realize, like, being an artist, like maybe in a creative environment, sometimes you want to interact with your other artist friends, but you see they're busy. And sometimes the worst thing to do is to try to interrupt somebody when especially in their deep thought. You can tell they're in the zone. You have to kind of learn what that is for that person because it's different for everyone. Some people kind of go with the flow and they're fine, but some go deep. I mean, deep. They're like a pearl diver. They take all this time to get down to their creative space, and they need that environment in order to function. And you go in, and you go, hey, and all of a sudden they have to swim all the way back to the surface and go, what?
Yes.
What is it that you need? And then, then they, maybe it works out, whatever that is. And then they have to swim all the way back down. And maybe they don't get back down there again. And so part of their day is kind of like wrecked, especially when they're in a flow. You have to communicate, you have to do your daily things. But that's important, I think, for a creative person to be able to have that security, to be free, and encourage, that. And the best work, I think, comes out of that. With what you're inspired by versus your environment that you're working in, it's like ultra important. Yeah.
And recognizing what works for you personally. Sometimes it's hard to know that, but once you know it, use it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the fun part.
That's Next slide. Now, understanding, of course, just for our viewers, sometimes the graphics don't necessarily come out exactly like they did for the judges. So while they're looking at this on the screen as such, they are obviously very familiar with the work as it came across the screen to begin with.
Yeah, this one's, they feel stretched and the colors are different than what the original.
Oh.
But that's closer to colors still, but for the monitor, but we're seeing it a little bit different. I don't know what monitor they may be, whatever color adjustments are there. But the thing for me on this one it was a button design, if I remember correctly, and I would assume for like a web page, type of thing. It works in that there's graphic and text next to each other. The graphic can help you kind of, identify what the button is, maybe visually, but the text for a button, it felt maybe a little bit too wordy. There was like, move to the district, and then work for the district, and then partner with the district. It's like, how many times do I have to see the district? It's almost like I just need to see, like, move and work and partner and connection or whatnot, and maybe have the district part. It can be somewhere else on the page. Like if somebody's coming to push on these buttons, they probably know where they are. you know, and what the main, I guess, subject is for that website. So I don't know if putting it in each button would be necessary, and it might actually hinder the viewer in being able to decipher which one they should be pushing on. That was the first thing that came to mind. And the second was where it is a button. I think that having buttons as text in a graphic kind of thing, it's utilized some, but probably not as much now these days. So things are more coded, whether it's HTML5 or using XML, you know, design, you know, cascading stuff. It's probably even different JavaScript, everything else and whatnot. I'm not as savvy in the technical side anymore, but it felt to me like the design may have been maybe older than current flow or standards. So I would look more maybe to the technology to drive some of it, and see how that would work. And it could be much more dynamic, much more interactive for the viewer. Having motion involved, things like that can be good. Too much is maybe disorienting. They have to hunt. What am I supposed to be clicking on? Okay. So web has changed a lot, and it's gotten very different, like how you approach that. And I think the expectations from the public are, I want it to kind of tell me where to go. You know, I don't want to have to decipher too much and that kind of thing. So as an overall design for, I guess, just basic buttons, it kind of works, but maybe in a different direction would probably strengthen it and work better with the simplifying, you know, elements. On the technical side, I think it would need to go further into more of a modern application of the tech versus for navigation purposes and simplicity, and changing out that information if it needs to. It'd be much easier than having to create a new graphic again. Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing. And it could be populated to other areas of the website, you know, with the technologies that are available now, I think, with coding and stuff. So
I agree. Yeah. I think, you know, if it were possible to see where these buttons are used on the web page, and then mm-hmm. what kind of information or area the designer had to work with, might make these make a little bit more sense to me. Because right now mm-hmm. they fall pretty flat, you know, especially using pictures in buttons. It becomes mm-hmm. a lot more difficult to swap them out or change anything.
Make them larger if they've already been compressed, and smaller, and then you have to have multiple versions, and that starts right. taking space. And yeah.
So it's, you know, these can certainly be very difficult items to work with. I'm not sure about the color palette. Again, maybe it would make a little bit more sense if we saw the web page as a whole. Mm-hmm. So standing alone, they do fall a little bit flat for me. You know, the text is clean, but I do agree, you know, a one-word button is a lot easier to navigate with mm-hmm. than having to more figure out where I need to go. You know, overall agree with those comments. And I think because we're not seeing where they're used, we might be a little bit less informed on how the pictures work mm-hmm. Or how the space works.
When I first saw it, I thought, and I know said that it was a button kind of thing, and I was like, is it a button for a navigation point, or is it, you know, I thought, well, maybe this might actually kind of work for an ad, you know, kind of a banner, kind of a button where it just comes up, maybe it scrolls through a top thing, and you see it, and if you happen to catch it, you click on it to go there. But if it's more of a very decisive navigation point where it's part of the design of the site and the flow of the site, then it might not work as effectively. Yeah. So.
Okay. Next graphic.
This one, it felt pretty linear, and I think it kind of needed to be, because we're dealing with dates. You could make things flow and kind of have an organic feel in it, where, you know, you're reading left to right, top to bottom, you know, type of things. So it reminded me of a timeline in an old history book, you know, that I would have like growing up. I don't know design-wise if that's all that was necessary, you know, if that was all it was really kind of asked for. If the the need was to have it be maybe a little more modern, a little bit more flow-oriented, a little more engaging than maybe changing it from a linear design to something that had a path of, a start point and end. I don't want to say a map kind of feel where you start here and you kind of go through, but it is more sometimes engaging to kind of have a variation. But if the need is just to say, okay, this happened here, and it's left to right, it's linear and it's history, then it might work fine for the needs. The background being just a kind of a grid felt to me like I was almost looking at like, well, is this like not finished? Does it feel like it's still in Illustrator kind of thing or something where, in the background grid, the snap grid is there, and I'm like, well, but why would that be? It's got to be an image. It's not just a screen grab of the workspace, So I don't know if that was as effective with it. Maybe some type of other very light graphic that is kind of supports what it is, the history of, kind of like the engineering, blueprints in the background, something like that maybe might, just enough information to give it some texture, but not so much to pull your eye away from what you're looking at, might help as well to help it feel maybe a little bit more finished.
Yeah, I got that feel too, was I really wanted to see something else in the background. And I don't have an answer for that. But I think it does need to be something subtle and clean, just something there so it's not the grid. I can see the grid because it is a lighter gray. It does give a little bit of texture. I think maybe it just wasn't the right choice for the background. But other than that, I like the bright colors. I like that, clean, linear type of feel. It feels like this was definitely designed for a purpose, which is awesome. And I think it meets that functionality of, here's the information, it's on a timeline, we're getting it across. One thing that kind of threw me was having the logo in the middle of the timeline. And I also don't have a good answer for how I would change that, but I did, on first look, kind of question why it was right in the middle of the timeline.
Yeah, I saw it and I looked at it and I'm like, okay, am I supposed to go out from here? Like, am I supposed to go from here to here? And then I saw the dates and I'm like, okay, no, this is chronological kind of feeling. So it's 1945, 47, 74, 76, and so on. And then I'm like, okay, so this is linear. But yeah, why is this graphic kind of here? I'd forgotten about that until you mentioned it. I agree with that as well. And everything had an equal kind of weight to it too, like visually. Like, I don't know if there was any more significant points in time versus others, or if everything's just equally important. It's almost like you can use size. You can use, if something's smaller, it can feel, and the color that you choose can feel like it's further back in space. So it's still important, but maybe not as significant in the history of. So some other element that may have happened that really was a turning point for that organization might be larger, kind of defined a little bit more, because you want to showcase that a little bit more maybe than the others. You get the other information, but you're starting to say, oh, this happened, but this was really important. This was the cool point, in the history. So playing with that might help as well, in the design of it. So.
Next graphic.
I kind of thought this was fun. It felt, it had that like hand-drawn kind of feel to it, little scribbles.
This is a lot of fun.
It feels like an infographic kind of feel, where you have the little animations where things are drawn out as they're talking and they're it's illustrating basically what's being said. You're seeing happen and kind of unfold in front of you. So it felt like that to me. So I was like, ooh, let me, and that's probably a little bit biased on my part because I like the infographic thing as well. But I thought the emblem there on the side, the logo stuff of the USN, it just popped. It just stands out right away. You see it immediately. And then the graphics on the other side, on the bottom side, you see that stands out. It made me want to look at it. Then I catch the other little pieces, and then to the very far right, the text was there. And I don't mind the style. I think it's okay. But being on its edge there was, I had to make sure that I really took time to read it and look at it. And playing with type is a fun thing to do, and I like trying to do it. I'm not as successful with it as I would like to be, but as a viewer just looking at it, that really made me have to work to get it, kind of thing, and that might not be what you want your viewers to do, just to kind of be edgy. So maybe putting that more first, so that's the first thing you have to do, but then everything's horizontal, but then something's vertical. It was harder.
Were you compelled by looking at the graphic to make that extra effort?
I think it worked okay, but I don't know if it would work for everyone. I mean, and going back to what we were talking about with the infographic, it's really important for it to be simple, direct you, and flow. And this, where it is an element, it doesn't really flow to it. It's just there. Mm-hmm. And it's defining a space, and that's fine. Maybe if that text was incorporated in a way that helped direct the viewer through the space, and the other elements were around it as you went, that might work a little bit better for me, personally. Other people might not have an issue with that, though. I mean, it might be okay. The handwritten text and the larger paragraphs, it is a lot to read, so you have to take the time to do that. And even though we all should read more, people just don't. So highlighting or bolding, I'm kind of a little bit of a proponent for that, whether it's if you even you push those elements just a little bit more here and there just to get keywords out, that might entice them to stop and read more. So maybe playing with that some as well. But overall, I kind of liked it. I thought it was definitely a good direction, and it was fun. A little coffee stain on there and stuff, that kind of thing. And the pencil in there is kind of cool too, because it just reinforces, I think, the hand quality of it. And it wasn't really distracting. It actually made me kind of want to look behind it to see Ask the Chief there. So that was kind of fun too.
Yeah, I agree. This one was a lot of fun. Yeah. I love, obviously, infographics and typography and all of those fun things. I do agree with the paragraphs. That's an excellent comment. Make a couple of the major words, highlight those major words, a different font, a larger font, anything just to draw the reader in a little bit more. I really like the laying the keel on the side. I kind of saw this piece as one of a series, being one rank, that maybe there are many of these out there, which would be really cool. So having that the title or this headline on the side, maybe it was to get it essentially out of the way.
Yeah,
If that is the purpose, then I think that's definitely achieved. And I certainly appreciate the time and effort that went into making that, laying the keel. It's very well done.
It made me look at it.
It made me look at it. Yeah,
I
definitely put in the effort to focus a little bit of attention on that. So
I even like the circle, like the text in the middle, like the fact it's like this is important, and look at this. When you have the text, but it says, basically visually it says, and look at the Medal of Honor. Look at this little drawing of it. And that's just fun, because it points us to where we're visually kind of supposed to go, and in that kind of design, it's really important to do.
Yeah, I think the flow kind of is disjointed enough, but it's also cohesive in the same way that things are circled and arrows and look here, look there. It's kind of how our brains work. We don't really work in much of a linear fashion, so it's nice to have all of these little pieces and then have the design aspect really draw it all together. It feels very cohesive. It feels like someone put a lot of time and thought into this, and it's very visually appealing. I really like this one.
Excellent.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's move on.
Okay, yeah. This was a really long one, like vertical one. It was really narrow, if I remember correctly. I liked how powerful the microphone was going into the pen, and just the incorporating different graphics together to make something new. It reminded me of a design for a diploma that my diploma from Ringling, where all the text was laid out and it was an exclamation point. And the center, the bottom of the dot was the emblem for the school. And it was graphic oriented. And it was kind of cool, you know. And that really struck me because it says, look at this, right? And it's kind of pointing to here, you know, visually. So my eye just kind of really fell like down into the bottom. The thing that was not as strong was the text. It was so small, and I know it's kind of written on the film and stuff, but it wasn't the thing, and I don't know if it's not really supposed to be the thing that you see first, but you do need to decipher it and consume that and walk away with it. The camera at the bottom gives me some more information about what, you know, is involved, but it felt more like it was kind of maybe just stuck on. Like it wasn't maybe as much a part of the main design. And I think that's because the mic and the pen kind of were engaged together. They were kind of an amalgam, you know, of those elements together. And the camera was separate. And for some it might not bother, but I think for a design sense, if you're starting in one direction, you kind of tend to try to continue with that. But the film strip, you know, worked relatively okay for me. It's simple. I didn't think it needed a lot in the background necessarily because it might distract from, you know, the power of that central element. The red dot pulled my eye to it because red on white or black obviously is going to get your attention very quickly. I would have liked to have seen that maybe in other places, maybe at least 3 places in the design possibly, to help pull the eye through the piece. So it basically says, okay, you notice this, now look at this red dot here. Oh, there's information there. Okay, now look at this red dot here. Oh, that's where I ended up, you know, as a final spot. And then it would have been maybe more of a design element than the one thing that's different than everything else, right? Because we tend to kind of are conditioned to that sometimes, where it's like, here's a hammer, here's a saw, and here's an orange. What's different? You know, when you're, as kids, we tend to do that. We're differentiating things and categorizing things. So for me, when I see a design and I see one element and it maybe not as the central focus and everything builds off of that, but it's part of the main focus, and I don't see it in other places, then I feel like, well, that's the thing that's different than everything else. Why is that important? Like really important, you know, or it's the thing that doesn't belong. Maybe, but if it is in part of the design, then it does belong. And I'm supposed to look at this, and that guides me, you know, as a viewer.
And
so
it's kind of then the question of why. Mm-hmm. If it's supposed to be there, then why?
Right.
So I kind of get the feel that, you know, there's a dot there at the top so that we read, you know, top to bottom.
Kind of start there and let it flow down.
And,
right?
you know, I can see that. I'm just not sure that it worked for me. The pen in this is really what threw me off. So for the microphone, for the film, for the camera, there's a lot of smaller lines and smaller detail in those 3, but the pen is a lot of just stark black space.
So the shape, like I don't know, how would you put that?
Just the style doesn't fit.
Of this, yeah,
the styles just don't fit together for me. And maybe it's just the style of the pen that would need to be changed.
The form is like, I guess, be the best way to say it, it's just really strong. You're right, it's a big block of black.
Right.
It's just kind of there, yeah.
It's a lot of black just right in the middle. So, and maybe the red dot again was to adjust for that. You know, maybe that's a comment that the designer heard. Trying to get our eyes to flow through that piece properly. But I'm just not sure about this one. You know, I see the elements are there, but it doesn't quite communicate much to me. So just kind of unsure of that one.
It reminds me of kind of an old, maybe a 70s style, kind of the start of kind of a 70s style poster, maybe even like a Cuban movie poster, silk screen kind of feel.
Yeah.
If the text was maybe even incorporated into the elements, you know, in that kind of retro style where it's like the actual pen has, you know, mass, you know, as a lettering in it or something that brings some detail to it.
That would have been really neat to see.
Yeah, because it not only gives you the form and the, you know, you get the idea that's a pen, but you're getting information in it. It's not just this object there.
Right.
So maybe that would really help kind of bringing that text up, making it more part of the design, and you can still have those elements involved, but it would be much more interesting to kind of flow through. And you have to then because you're reading, you know, so you're flowing through those elements that way. So, yeah.
Okay, next graphic.
This one, for me, it's I was confused a little bit. It felt like the kind of the wave graphic at the bottom, like the little streaks through it. It felt more like waves than it did like winds. So for me, it's flow. Yeah, wind creates waves. I get it, but visually, immediately, it didn't really catch me as much. It felt like it was on the border of working. The 50 for 50, without reading more information, I have no idea what that means. I'm not sure what that would connect. The lettering didn't bother me that much. You know, it kind of is wispy. It kind of feels, you know, with the flow of things. But then the text at the bottom kind of falls out of the design. It felt like it was like, okay, I have this kind of idea for a logo, and here it is. And then, but here's this information. And
Right.
I probably would have, if I was doing it, I probably would have tried to make that text flow more with the design, whether I'm curving it a little bit maybe, or something to help bring that round kind of feel in and encompass it, you know, without stretching the text, you know, and fitting the space or something. But maybe something like that would help complete it so it didn't feel as much separated. And then I thought, well, is this on a business card? Is this on a letterhead? You know, these things pop up, and I'm like, is that going to be too small? Is it going to be identifiable from a distance? And so those were concerns. You have to get up and step away, stand 6 feet away from it, and look at it. Even if it's on a computer screen, just don't look and say, can I even identify what's going on there? You know, when we're working like this, you can see everything. But in passing or really small and whatnot, walking by something, it has to be able to catch you. And you have to be able to get that information really quickly. So step away from it. Get up. Don't be like tied to your monitor all the time. You have to step away and look from a distance sometimes.
Yeah.
See how it reads.
With that is, you know, just
Yeah.
print a proof copy on, you know, copier paper and see
Right,
what happens.
right. Yeah,
And sometimes that'll take you in a different direction too, because I agree with this. I'm not sure about the 3 different typefaces, and then part of that bottom 50 being cut off with, I thought those were waves too.
Right. That's kind of what pushed me towards that. I'm like, oh, okay, waves in the ocean, and wait, trade winds? Wait a minute. Okay,
Yeah.
well, maybe sailing, you know, trade winds, I get it. But it just didn't connect immediately for me. I had to take time to kind of decipher. And in a logo like that, you don't want to have to do that. You don't want to have to piece together things. It needs to say what it is, like right away, and be really clear. So.
Yeah, it's, you know, I feel like depending on what this is for, I feel like there could be a lot more fun with this. It's kind of a one color deal. I'm not sure why the blue was used, so I would need to know kind of more why to make that judgment. But I feel like this could be a lot more fun. Logos can and should be fun, and you should be able to get a lot of mileage out of very little space. And for this, I feel like I have more questions than answers just from looking at it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, next graphic.
More infographics.
More
Yeah,
infographics, yes.
I saw this one. I kind of dug it. I liked the first thing that I saw, even though there's a lot of information and the red is in the middle. I did see the numbers first because they're red and they jump out. They definitely contrast with the background, and red always typically commands your attention. So, but I didn't really read what was next to it after I saw the red. My eye, for me, immediately went to the left. And the thing that I thought was kind of cool is that there was these different layers. It was one of the first pieces that I was seeing when I was going through the material that was starting to push kind of a sense of depth in the graphic. And where 2D and flat is okay sometimes, it turns into the shapes on the surface have to be really strong because you're only dealing with one plane, when you're dealing with a little bit more depth, I think there's an invitation to go a little deeper, to get into it a little bit more. So I like that. And I would have maybe worked with the type a little bit more. The first one up at the top, which capable adaptive partners, just it doesn't separate enough. It's too small. It's kind of hard to read. The REM pack stands out like right away. It's bold, strong. You see it. The date, stands out and reads. But then the specific dates, like June 22nd or 27th through August 2nd, that was really small, and that seemed like it might want to be maybe a little stronger because it's a very, 2018 is fine, but when, and if you want to bring somebody to something in a specific window, that needs to be clear. So maybe a little stronger, a little bit bigger for that. I don't think the font is wrong or anything like that, but just maybe a little larger or on a different layer or something like that in the design. Then I went back and I'm like, oh, there's cool silhouettes, and graphics. Let me read all this other stuff. And that worked for me, but I may have put it maybe in a different order, maybe more of an order of importance. Partnerships are obviously important, but it is a big block of text. And so that maybe in place, I saw personnel, 25,000 personnel. What's most important, gear or people? To me, that's what came out like in my thoughts. And if this was something that was like information-wise, whether it was recognition or the strength that's there in it, people are always the most strongest that are involved.
Yes.
So I may have put that maybe higher on the list, as far as the order of things, and still had those. And maybe as I'm going, it may have been more personnel, ships, aircrafts, like something simple, and then the block of text. So it doesn't run together as much. It separates a little more.
What I will tell you is, just in terms of command information, the biggest thing that we push with RIMPAC is that partnership.
The partnership.
That is the most important thing when you talk about all of these countries coming together to train together for that extended period of time.
Okay.
So that's why I would think that they had that at the top.
Was it first? Yeah.
And then lethality is our next one, which comes into the ships, submarines, and aircraft.
Okay.
And then at the bottom, though I don't disagree with you that I think, obviously you're people first, but I'm pretty sure that may, or I can't say pretty sure, that may have gone into the choice
design.
Of where to put things.
I would work with the size then. I would say, well, if the top and the nation, the 25 nations and the list of nations is important because it's a small type, I would maybe make that, like play on that and make it a stronger element by making it larger so that we can see it. And then downsize the size of the graphics. You can still have the element, maybe in that order, but bring the size down, because when I was looking at the imagery itself, I didn't go to all the people visually necessarily. I went to the bigger silhouette, which was the plane and the helicopter. You have more to display with the ships and submarines because there's more elements, so they're naturally smaller. But just maybe playing with the size of the silhouettes would help that significance of like, this is like important, and this is important too, and this is important as well, and kind of work that maybe a little bit more, and it would help. I thought it was successful in all means. I didn't really have much. These are more like little tweaks that I might like do just to help push it to that next little place that really solidify it.
I agree. I think overall it's very successful. And I do agree, some variation in size might have been nice here, because it does look, just at first view, it looks like all of these things are somehow equal, maybe equal importance, equal in statistics somehow, or we should view them all in the same ballpark. And if that's not what we're going for, then some variation might have been nice there. I will say that the red is a little bit jarring, and it could just be the different screens that I've looked at, but I think a softer red, and maybe that's just a feminine touch, I don't know. But I think
red's a hard one. You have to look at
very
broadcast and print and
Yeah.
everything. You get out of your gamut like really fast with the red. If it's too saturated and it bleeds and doesn't look good, and you have to be careful with those for sure.
Yeah, so, and that might just be a personal preference, but that red is very strong. I do agree, I like the dimension that we have here on the left, but what that does for me is then make the silhouettes on the right feel a little bit flat.
Oh, because of the dimension aspect,
Yeah, there's just that juxtaposition then.
So you'd like to see them maybe pop more in some way, or
Yeah, I think have them pop out a little bit more, or maybe just have a little bit of detail to them, because that dimension on the left is so beautiful that it almost draws me away from the information.
Right.
Which is very important. You know, we want to read that and we want to look at that, but visually I feel like my eye is more drawn to that dimension on the left.
Next graphic.
This one was fun. I thought that it was, it says exactly what it is. It's an air show. You know, and at least for me, growing up as a kid, you know, that was the cool thing to see, you know, see the planes flying and stuff, and they were loud, and you get to go on some of them, and that kind of thing. So it felt like fun, you know, having the pilot upside down, the jet, you know, fighter planes flying behind. It felt a little greenish to me. I know that the ground plane is kind of green, but it picked up the same kind of greens in the pilot's, like in the facial area and stuff, and it wasn't necessarily just a flight uniform kind of feel. It just felt like that was kind of over the whole thing. Maybe if they push those just a little bit differently, it wouldn't feel like, oh, this is washed with green, you know, kind of thing, and that would help separate some of those elements. It's a subtle thing. I don't think it's ultimately detrimental for me. I kind of like the cockpit kind of glass kind of feel, the bubble kind of feel around the edges. That was cool.
That.
It's not in the way, but it gives kind of a feel, which is good. Text was clear, right down all the way to the information. The thing that in the central kind of design of the logo at the bottom, like kind of divides that information, that wasn't, didn't distract me or anything. It actually helped kind of identify those groupings. The thing on the right that caught me was like, I'm not sure what this is being used for. If it was on a social media kind of platform or something like that, then I can seeing the Facebook, the Twitter, the icon thing, and they're popular to see now. If that was meant for me to share this event, you know, which typically when I see that, it's like, oh, there's a Facebook, I can share that on my Twitter feed, or I can share that on my Facebook account if I click that button. But if this is a poster, I'm like, I don't know, that's not going to help me. You know, if I'm walking by, it's not, well, where do I go? I don't know. Where's the link to? I see, oh, there's a little web, you know, the web address there, but now I have to type it in and I have to go share it on my account and stuff, and that most people aren't going to do that. If it's a digital format and those buttons are there, they'll use them. But in this case, I don't know if it necessarily really is necessary unless this was meant to be used on a media platform versus an a print or something, and it would just happen to be there for the print.
Or, you know, maybe for simplicity, it's kind of one poster design and it was used
kind of
everywhere.
Streamed out everywhere in
So,
different media. Yeah.
You know, that's possible, but I agree. I haven't tried to go up to a poster in a hallway and touch it, so.
Right, not yet.
I might try that now.
Yeah. That's just what I thought, and it just might, it's there, and it's not going to hinder anything, but is it necessary? You know, if it, like you said, if it's one design that was going to be, and you had a time constraint, you had to get it done, and it needed to be going to different formats and stuff, and it was like, okay, whatever. But if this was like a show poster to be put out for advertisement or something, I'm like, is it really necessary to have that? It's not going to do anything for the person walking by.
Right.
Yeah.
And taking those icons out, that block of text could have been made larger, which
so you could see,
would have been
read it
nice.
And see it. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I agree. I do see that green hue. And I think what that does for me is it almost makes the white a little bit too stark, since it does feel like there's almost this filter on the image. The white feels very harsh because there isn't really any true white in the graphic. But I like white space. Overall, I really like this piece. I think it's fun. I think we've said a lot of things are fun, but this one is fun. I like the typography. It is slightly hard to read, especially the numbers and then air and space show with that gradation of color. That can be a little bit hard to read, but overall, I think this is a great piece. It's fun, especially for kids and teenagers. You know, the pilot is upside down.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
That's flying. You know, that's what you want to do. You want to turn, roll, take a loop.
No, that's not at all what I would want to do. No.
I am, now that I'm looking at it now, actually, I'm glad this happened, because sometimes looking at it once and moving on is one thing, but looking at it multiple times, you start to pick up on some of the details. For me, and I don't know if it's for you too, but some of the text, because that strong line is in the center of the graphic, and the bottom where the emblem is, the text feels off center. If visually, I might push the 2018 over a little bit more, so it feels more center with that point of the plane at the bottom and that line, so it doesn't feel weighted to one side or not. If it's slightly off, it's an issue. If it's more off, then it's a design. You know, kind of, it may help with flow and where do we start and where do we end up. But this seems very central. Everything is kind of balanced with that center mark, so I might look at that. And when you're dealing with text, depending on what font you use, it might be dead center, but it doesn't look visually. The weight of it isn't dead center, so you have to play with the spacing of those letters. Even if you go individually and push some over versus others, sometimes you have to do that to separate the font itself because they're like touching too close, and it feels clumpy in one area versus another. And so playing with that is definitely something. If you're going to be using text like that, I would go in and individually edit some of those things sometimes if I needed to, just for the visual weight of things.
Yeah, for that visual weight, sometimes you gotta turn your grid off and you gotta turn your guides off. And look at it and see, is it actually balanced? Things might seem like they're centered, but especially with strange fonts, and script fonts are the worst offender. What is centered, by the numbers is not actually centered when you look at it.
I may be seeing it because we're like 10 feet from it now. Whereas when I was looking at it, I was, the first time I saw it was like, it was right on my screen here, so I'm like this close. So I'm not seeing visually maybe how things are placed as much. I'm seeing elements, I'm seeing composition, but when I step away from it, sometimes those things will show up visually more than not. Too. So.
All right, next graphic.
This one was kind of fun too. I thought it had an older kind of feel to it, which is necessary, but given the dates and the time frame. the lettering was clear. I like the fact that it was just down towards the bottom. I like that. I felt like the logo kind of competed with the plane and the imagery of the pilot. I don't know if the emblem is necessary. Is it in honoring this pilot, and that's most important, or is it honoring the group? And so the visual weight I would play with maybe a little bit more. It's an important element. It should be there, but I don't know if the placement of it is maybe the right place. I felt like that everything kind of had an equal weight too, like depth-wise, and tonality. Everything kind of felt like it was kind of the same, even though the figure's kind of sepia tone feeling. It has an older kind of feel to it because it's that like almost like an old photo kind of feel. But I might try to push that. If it's not, I mean, it's clear, I might try to push that more so it feels more like it's part of the sky kind of feel, but clear to see and legible. Have the plane be maybe more forward, and then have that emblem be like really strong, but in maybe lower down, closer to the text in the bottom, and that would help draw my eye down. But I would want to create a flow. It feels kind of clustered up there in the side.
It's also very hard to put things near to people's faces.
Yeah.
Because visually it looks like they might be hit by it.
Right. Yeah. It's like.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're right there, you know? Yeah.
Is he going to run into that?
Yeah.
And gonna bump
It
his
distracts
nose?
you from looking at him.
Right.
You know, so that no kind of busyness needs to be, I think, simplified on it. But I like the direction on it. I like the, you know, being up high and above the land, and the plane gives me a time period reference. The imagery might not for the figure, but because it's kind of sepia tone, it gives it that older feel, so that kind of works for me. Those are just the areas that I would push further. I think it would just strengthen it, you know. But overall, it was pretty cool. I like it, and it kind of felt nice. So.
Yeah, this one, it has a really nice feel to it. One thing that I may want to adjust is just the typeface, because there's just this beautiful, ethereal, very, you know, colorful feel, and then this text at the bottom is white and very modern.
Yeah.
You know, that there's a little bit of a juxtaposition there. So maybe just a way to blend those two pieces together a little bit more.
What did you think about the emblem as part of the memoriam?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I probably would like that emblem more lower. I think the right-hand side of the piece, I think, is fine. You know, for that emblem.
In the text in the bottom, actually, from the plane, is the O. Necessary or not?
I'm hesitant on trying to make letters too fancy.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I was kind of on the border with that.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure about it. I mean, it felt kind of nice, but I didn't know if it was really necessary so much. Maybe it was just to bring that imagery in it because it was blocked by the wing of the plane, and that would help identify. But again, it's just disjointed from everything else. So, yeah.
And I thought it's also it feels very purposeful. So I don't think I pointed out removing it.
Yeah.
There's definitely a reason that that O is a graphic. I'm not totally up to speed on why, but
right.
But there's a reason for it. I just wish that the typeface kind of matched the style of the piece.
You know, it almost feels like, you know, we're talking about this. It feels like there were different elements that were kind of separate. They were all on the desktop, you know, and here's the bottom text, and there's a little design went into that. And then, well, here's the graphic of the plane. I have this over here. And here's the graphic of the person. I have it over here. And here's the emblem. And so I had to create a background. And they kind of worked with the background. And it was like, okay, let me put this here. Let me put this here. Let me put this here. And it became more of a kind of trying to make everything fit and organize it rather than an overall conceptual design. So it feels like, I think that's where that disjointed feel comes from for me. It feels like they're elements that are on there, but maybe not designed at the same time or together with some end goal in mind.
All right, next slide.
I liked this one. I thought this one was really pretty cool. It was a cover for a guide, I think, for like a manual, I think it was. That seemed really strong to me. The background graphics seemed like they were out of the way. I might have pushed the building maybe a little bit. It's in the same ground plane as the logo, almost with its intensity, so maybe pushing that back, like brightness-wise, might feel a little bit better. I like the swipe through the middle. It pulls me across the 55. The lettering was clear. The planes on there, it seemed to work really strong for me. So,
yeah, I think with this one, it's all the pieces are there. It's fairly cohesive. I think it works as, you know, the cover for a guide. And, you know, looking at it, I'm not sure that there's really anything else that needs to be there. It serves its purpose, I think, and I thought it was strong in that way. There. It didn't need to be anything else, but it's visually, it catches you. It makes you go, oh, what's that? You know, right. Or if you get it and it's something that you're supposed to go through, it kind of invites you to do that. It's like, hey, there's something cool in here, and most of the time manuals aren't too cool. You know, so there's a lot of
especially in the government
requirements and wordage and stuff like that. So I think that was kind of it would bring a little excitement to it. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay. Next graph.
This one I thought was kind of fun. Everybody can kind of identify with the figure, you know, and being around Christmas time, and it's kind of childlike and kind of playful. There's a little bit of modern kind of feel to it because the guitar doesn't feel like maybe the same kind of space or time period as the graphic would be, but I don't mind that so much because it is a modern event. So the lettering at the top felt a little bit like it blended in with the background some because it's a thin type. It's script, it works, but I think maybe with the music, the bar, you know, the notes and the staff and stuff like flowing through the background just kind of noises it up a little bit. Maybe darkening the sky, so there's a little bit more darker area up at the top, which would naturally be anyway, and more atmosphere towards the horizon, you know, will give it that atmospheric kind of effect. The banner at the bottom felt okay to me because it's just festive, and you see that typically with Christmas type of stuff. But if I remember when it was stretched like taller, the bottom felt very empty to me, and I was like, well, what's supposed to go down here? It felt like, oh gosh, they missed putting some information on here they should have put on there. The graphics missing or something, the copy's missing. And I'm like, well, I probably should just pull the whole imagery down a little bit. And that would create some more space for that lettering at the top. And you could separate it a little bit more, and it would just clean it up a bit and work a little bit better. But overall, it was fun. It's exactly what I would expect to see with an event like this. So I thought it was pretty cool overall for me.
It's fun. I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead.
The mouth was the other thing that I was looking at. It's a frown. He doesn't look happy. He looks like he's like, I'm playing the guitar, you know.
Is he a nutcracker?
I think so.
It's supposed to be kind of, I think, a nutcracker. I still would maybe play, his eyes feel very kind of sad, and his mouth feels like he's biting his teeth, like I'm getting through this event. You know, and I don't know if your audience wants that. So I might maybe play with the mouth, the graphic of the mouth a little bit. Even if it was one piece, I'd trace it out in Illustrator or something like that, and then adjust those points just to make it a little happier, more festive, you know, kind of feel to it, and maybe work with the eye shape a little bit, and that would help, I think, project more of the intent for the event visually for that. That was the only thing. Sorry.
No, I think there was a lot crammed into a small space, so it does start to feel disjointed for me. It kind of feels like here's a layer that's the sky and the snow, and here's a layer that's trees, and here's some text, and here's some music, and here's a ribbon, and it doesn't really flatten down for me. Especially at the top, I was a little bit thrown off by how the lines are broken. Because for me, I want to read Heartland of America Band, and the way that it's split, it's kind of Heartland, and then some of that white text gets lost in the snow.
It's kind of buried in there.
So it's a little bit difficult to read for me, but that's certainly an easy adjustment. I like the Nutcracker. It's fun. I think it's throwback to childhood, but it's the style of design that I would hope to see, or I would expect to see. Gets you in that seasonal spirit, and big red ribbon right around it. And I did have the same question about all of the white space at the bottom, and I thought maybe it was so they could put dates in.
Yeah, some other type of information there or something. Yeah,
kind of a multi-use piece of this can be used for different locations on different days.
It might be, but it just felt like something was missing.
It feels blank.
Yeah.
But
I might change the size of one of the trees too, because they're very equal in size, so it puts them on the same plane. I'm a big proponent of depth, even in a graphic like this, because it is a landscape, and so I want to stay up front, but I want to feel like they're in a space. So maybe even changing one size of the tree will and make the tone a little darker, so it just feels like it's further back in space. Would help create a little bit more depth and kind of pull it, that way. So not a big thing, but again, little tweaks that make a big difference sometimes. Won't know until you really see it. I always say do it and then compare.
Right.
And then you can make a better decision about things. Don't try to do it all in your head. Don't have this grand, idea of what it should look like and then just try to do it. It's like, play with it, experiment, compare. You won't know it until you see it, so just do it. It's not going to take but 3 minutes, to do something like that. So.
Save it and make a new copy, and if you don't like it, you can always go back to the last version that you had.
Yeah, multiple versions, always. And when you get a good one, save a copy of it, because you never know what happens with a file. You lose your good mark, and then you're up the creek, Yeah, so you're going, oh my God, I got to start over. Sometimes that works out well, though. You can push through and things fall into place really quickly because we're moving in a direction, and it actually works out a little better. But deadlines and time frames, that's always important too. So yeah.
All right, let's continue.
This one for me, it felt the same way. It felt like I think you had mentioned earlier in one of the other pieces that the gradient on the text. It kind of feels like it's kind of okay, but it doesn't work. The black part of the text of 595th, and then it says like command and control group. Okay, like I have to really look to see that. It's maybe too close, a little bit too close to the background color, the grays. That one's darker than the other, but I think more contrast will work. Gradients, not a huge fan of that. Rather see that in a different light. I lose the detail. I think it looks like rivets on there now that I see, like on the lettering. There's like a little, like plain rivets or something. That was the idea there, but it gets lost in it. So if you're going to do something like that, I would go stronger with that design element, but don't hide it. Make it as clear as possible if you're going to do something. The logo in the middle felt like it was a central theme initially, but then the year, like it felt like it was just kind of stuck in there. Maybe it's just that whole block of text just too close to the central elements, the graphics. Some separation there might work better. I don't know if I would assume that's the moon, like kind of at the top. I don't even know if it's necessary with it. It could just eliminate that and just pull the text up.
That was there.
Yeah, because it's not a space thing. It's just an air flight type of, I would assume, command and control group. I don't know if there's satellite or anything like that involved, but we're not getting any imagery of that. So it feels like that element that doesn't, like what's different than everything else? It just doesn't feel like it maybe belongs. The ground stuff, the plain, and the contrast in that, it's just like white. It jumps out. It almost protrudes out into space, which is really kind of cool. That caught my eye like right away. And the organization of the text down the bottom, it feels okay to me. The wrenches there give me in a sense that this is a ground crew kind of a thing, like they're part of maintenance, which is okay. But the text in the bottom right-hand side is like really kind of small. Serves.
What do you think about the QR
served it
code?
in.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know because
Yeah.
a lot. So, you know, in all honesty, my son thinks they're cool. He wants to grab my phone and go, you know, see what it is, which is fun. Where is it taking me? What is it putting on my phone? I don't typically scan those things anymore because it opens you up, I think, to some malicious type of things in some cases. Granted, that's probably not going to happen with this, but I think the tendency for the public is to kind of stay away from those things. I don't know if they'll take the time to do it. There's always kind of a question like, well, what is it doing? Is it taking my location information? Is it putting me on some list somewhere? Am I going to start getting ads for this thing now that I don't want? You know, all that.
Do you find it distracting?
Yeah. Kind of.
Yes.
It's not part of the design.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. The QR codes are very hard to use so that they are user-friendly and appropriate. Because with this kind of also a poster feel, you would need the user to go up to it in a hallway or on a board and be seen by other people scanning this code, which that can be a deterrent right there.
Yeah.
So maybe more usable on handout pieces or at a table of information or something like that. I tend to really not use them unless pushed or given a good reason.
And it should be information, whatever that information is and whatever it's taking you to go see or to get, it really should be kind of noted, I think, today in the social responsibility aspect of things where we're using media and stuff. What are you actually giving to me?
Right.
Or what are you taking from me? Like what is it that this is for is always a question. And that information or that what you're getting from that has to be something that enriches the experience. And I don't know if that's going to do it for a poster. You know, if it's some other type of media, like what's like where you have a brochure or something, and then you scan that, but it takes you to like a gallery of images that shows you the landscape of what this place is, you know, and something they couldn't put in print because it's just too much. But it takes you further into that experience, and someone has bought in, kind of signed off the okay to do that because they're actually initiating that activity, and they're aware of what it kind of is, then I think it's a different story. You know, it could work better for you.
Right, and I think it's, you know, one of those, if you have a QR code and it's in your brochure and maybe, you know, watch this video about our staff. That's something, you can't print a video, so obviously you can scan, you can learn more, and maybe for this piece, it needed to give me a little bit of a hint on where we were going. You know, because there's Friday, November 16th, here's the hours, here's the location, so what else do I need to know?
Wow, I just noticed that was the November 16th. I thought that was like a year.
Yeah,
And it didn't even really register to me.
I'm not in love with the way that
Yeah.
type is laid out, because it is pretty disjointed. And I kind of feel like the wrenches were an afterthought.
Okay, placed on there. Yeah, maybe if they're using it maybe a different way. I like the idea because I think it ties in with the theme, but maybe in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and let's continue.
This one, I like the lettering. I thought it was kind of fun. It's kind of spacey. I'm a sci-fi geek, so I kind of saw that and I was just like, ooh, this looks like it'd be like a Warhawks, like a novel, sci-fi novel kind of feel to it. But then I'm like, okay, it's a logo. I got the fact that it was a bird, kind of a hawk, obviously from the title, but it felt noisy. The body of the hawk itself, like the neck area and the streak up through the middle and stuff. I identified it, but it didn't really like jump out. Not like that night was, where like you see it as clear. It's like you don't have to decipher anything. I'm looking like, is the mouth open? Is that a beak? Is he screaming? And I thought that could be cleaned up more in maybe the mouth area, if that's what it's supposed to be. I don't know. I got the eye, but it seemed like that might want to be a stronger element, like the eye of a hawk. That's the nature of a hawk, is like, they can seek out their prey really quickly and from a great distance in height, and their eyesight is immaculate. So something like that I thought might need to be maybe a stronger element in it. But then again, size, detail, is it really going to play that well or not? So I thought simplicity, you got to simplify this. And so it's just cleaning up that graphic for me, really. Yeah. And the gradation, the W and the K kind of disappear a little bit. But the triangles are strong, and they're geometric. So I went back and forth with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's strong aspects to this from a logo point of view. The two things that you can't print, which are metallics and gradations.
Right.
So
This is the banding that might come in play and stuff.
Yeah. So this, as is, can't be screen printed, can't be digitally printed. You're not going to get the right feel out of it. So it may be that there's another version of this that's solid color, which would alleviate that burden. But tend to stay away from those kind of metallics and that kind of shiny feel for logos. The other thing I had to do with this was I had to look up the Thundercats logo right away.
Oh yeah.
It just reminds me so
It's
much
kind
of
a feel
of Thundercats. Yeah.
You have to be careful with that stuff too. It can be, you can pull inspiration from things, but getting too close sometimes is like, it's considered a no-no, and copying outright obviously is like a bad no-no.
Hey, it was a great
People
show.
get caught
I
doing
love
that.
Oh yeah, Thundercats.
Thundercats, come on.
It's the best.
I with things like this, I tend to kind of, you saw me doing this probably. I squint, and when I squint and look at things sometimes, it takes the details away, and so I see the form more. And if I squint at this and try to read what the top is, like the graphic, I can't make it out. It almost looks like a helmet to me, some kind of space age kind of helmet or something. And the face is missing, So that is something I do to kind of help with these situations where it's like, it has to be the shape and proportions and the silhouette have to read really well, especially if it's going to be small. The details get in the way. So the simple nature of things is like, if I took say an animated character, like a Ren and Stimpy character, or I took a Mickey Mouse and I put it in silhouette, I would immediately recognize that character. I could do a whole poster of that and just look at all those characters and go, oh, yeah, Ren and Stimpy, oh, Goofy. Yeah, you can see them immediately without seeing any of the details. And a logo goes kind of the same way, at least with the form of it. And does that work? Does it hold its visual weight, and is it recognizable with like a bird or something like this? It needs to be. So maybe a trick to kind of work through those things.
All right, moving on.
I like this one.
I like this one
look,
too.
it's an
More
infographic. Woohoo!
It's so colorful, and then the more I got to looking at things, I didn't mind it so much for me if it was kind of busy. The text blocks were small, but I think the thing that saved me in it is that the color of the block was used in the color of the graphic at the top. So the first thing I see is kind of this overview of this interesting thing that has all the elements in it. There's colors involved, there's silhouette involved. So I can recognize shape, I can recognize form, I can recognize color, I can differentiate things. I know they're all part of the same thing because they're all part of the same landscape. I get the type at the top, it's clean, it's easy to read. So that just preps me, like visually, for everything else that I'm going to get into. And so when you get down to the next elements, you're like, oh, the color, oh, that block, yeah, the silhouette, oh, that plane, oh, that's that one there. Made me want to read it. It made me want to go through it then because I was engaged already. And so I really liked this one. I didn't have much to say that after just seeing that in the design of it. There wasn't too much else that really kind of made me go, or I don't know, maybe it could have done, this isn't, what is it? And I didn't have to really decipher anything. So I liked it. I thought it was really effective. This could go in a brochure, it could go on a website, it could be interactive on a website, you know? Ooh. You could do kind of an animated layer thing where you go over the plane and it changes into something, or the text comes out, or something engaging, there where it keeps you there, playful, and going through it. So yeah.
I was also just very engaged with this. I like the colors. I like the way that immediately I knew it was one piece. It was cohesive, and it really did. It drew me in, and I got that feel of, all right, well, let me read this. What's this all about? So I really don't think there would be much that I would change here. It's definitely one of my favorites.
The text was really small for me. I had LASIK surgery on my eyes, so I can see really pretty good at a distance now. I can see everything on the table. I can read the text on the bottle. But things close up, I have to have glasses now. So even I found that I'm on my phone a lot, I'm working things. So if this was a poster, it would work really well. If it was a magazine, it would work really well. If it was a graphic on a website or something like that, or in a mobile app type of thing, it would be really, really, really hard for me to read the text. I would miss out on the information. Given the amount of information, I don't know what really could be done. I don't know if you could boil that down any further, in it. So that would just be a concern. What medium is it going to? And if it was going to something like that, there would need to be a solution. It would have to be kind of, whether it's maybe the rollover thing where you put your mouse over it and that text, the headline on the text, like lead plane, would be larger. And when you went over it, then it would take the graphic and the head text away, but it would make the block of text underneath larger to be able to read. And that would be the engaging point, but it would help me decipher that information. So,
I think you could use this, you could adapt this in a number of ways.
There's definitely workable solutions because of how it was designed. That really sold me on it. So definitely.
Next.
The animation, yes. This one, I'm an animator at heart. I do mostly animation. I've been animating for 20 years. It's animated in that it moves. Technically, I would like to see more, I'm going to use technical terms, ease in, ease out, arcs, overlapping actions, settle in, any of the principles of animation that most animators would want to really dive into. And there were principles that were created by Disney, the Disney animators, and there are 12 principles of animation. There's more. But you have appeal and staging and overlapping action, follow through, these different terms that describe different situations. It feels kind of static. It moves, and so it's animated, but it doesn't have a life to it. And I would rather see something that starts out and eases in it and comes to a stop, or goes past the point and settles in, or anticipates and then leaves, because it prepares me for what's happening. If I don't have that, then it just happens, and then I find myself trying to track it, and that takes me away from the information that I'm supposed to be reading. So you have to, when you start moving things, it's a totally different world. You have to prepare the viewer for what they're going to see. And those principles will help. They'll help make them feel more organic, or create anticipation, and that kind of thing.
Where would, if we had some graphic artists, graphic designer kids that are listening right now, where would they go find those principles?
Just do a search on the internet. Just go to Google and type in 12 principles of animation, and you will get like a million sites that will list, either in various forms, text. You can go to YouTube. There's animators that have, made projects out of them as animating those principles and kind of illustrating what the principle is about. Once you get an idea for that, then you can go just watch most animated films, anything but anime. Some anime they have their own principles, where everything explodes, contracts first, and then light beams come out, and then it radiates, energy tenfold. But the traditional principles you can find that way, and then go watch animated films. The principles are used in various degrees, depending on the character, depending on what's going on. You can do search for motion graphics work, and you will find tons of stuff there. And then just try to identify those principles. Once you read through and understand what the principle is kind of about, and you read through some of the tutorial things, then when you're looking at the material, you'll start to recognize more things. You'll go, oh yeah, there's anticipation there. Like, oh, I like that. Oh, the subtle end's kind of cool. Oh, it's noisy. It kind of vibrates. That makes me look at it. Right. And that would be where I would go. Just go scavenge the internet for everything you can find, and then you'll decipher things. One thing will have a little cool thing, another thing will be really nicely done, all of it, and so you'll piece it together over time. And then you have to explore them. You have to just make things happen. Even if you take like just a sphere and put it in Illustrator, or well, not Illustrator. You could do it in Photoshop. You could do it in After Effects, anything like that. Anything you could keyframe and move around, and just move things. Just make them play. Have fun. It's like kind of animating with a penny, or something, and just get a feel for the timing and the flow, and bringing things to a stop, and getting things in motion and then going, and those will start to seep into your work. It'll just start to kind of naturally happen. I think it takes time though. You have to explore it. So,
Rebecca, what'd you think?
This is the piece that. Ever since I was very young, I get motion sick very easily. And reading words that feel like they're flying through space is a little bit of a hurdle for me. So I don't know. It definitely, I always say I like movement in pieces. And this is one that, I'm worried about, the satellite bumping into things. And, I think there's a point where I feel like one of the pieces is, flying at me. So I'm a little bit more sensitive to that than most people might be.
You get that with the right-left, a lot of right-left kind of action, because it makes us try to track and move. And that becomes disorienting. I think if you go left, you go left to right, or right to left, or up top to bottom, or whatever, to get into, to kind of bring it to us. But then you need to push it towards us. And when you push something towards it, says pay attention. It says, oh, look at me. And when you pull something away, it means, oh, don't look at me anymore, look at this. And that, you get subtle with that. And let the kind of introduction be a little faster, but then tell us what to look at. Give us motion where you want us to see things and whatnot, and try not to move the text around so much. Let it just fade in and out. You can just bring the graphic in and out. That would be more interesting. And then I think you run less into that, like, oh, this is going to hit that, and, right. and I'm going right and left, and I don't know where to look. You have to put your action safe up, and you really need to look at like where your framing is. You go with your rule of thirds. Start there, centralize things, work on a third, open space, prepare to go into it so we know we're going, so you're not, all of a sudden it's moving and you feel like you're going, and that motion sickness kind of jarring kind of feel comes into play. So again, all those principles and stuff will help. You just got to dive in a little bit further, I think.
All right, let's move on.
This one, it felt very familiar to me, actually. It felt like, I don't know if you've ever been to SIGGRAPH. It's a conference, electronics conference they do. There's some military sim and stuff that goes, but motion capture stuff, and a lot of tech-oriented things. But a lot of the big movie companies would come. It's very familiar to a graphic that I saw a number of years ago, and there. And it was for San Diego, actually, the place. So it felt familiar. It felt like it fit the region. It has a feeling of movement to it. I think it was more of a homage to like San Diego, to like California, than it was for like visual storytelling workshop. So I don't know if the graphic really served the event more than it served the region. That maybe have been what they wanted, you know, like, hey, come to San Diego for this thing. It's fun, you know, it's like tropical, you know, I don't know.
I saw it, so that lighter, that teal blue, is a shutter.
It did look like that to
that.
me. That's why
that was
it was
so
that
neat.
kind of feel in the electronics graphic, you
Yeah.
know, or the conference, because they do film and media and simulation and virtual reality stuff. So, and they show animation, films, and stuff like that at that conference. So it was very similar in that way. Yeah. I'm not saying that it was like taken from that or anything. I think for the region, I think that's why they did it. It probably works well. It would be something that I would expect like a regional shop there would do, because they typically do a lot of things like that for the event because of tourism and the feel of trying to bring people in, and usually city people and stuff like that would have that want to push that end of things. But again, I don't know if that really served this event or who's putting this event on and that kind of thing. So maybe it was a partnership, you know, I don't know. So I have a hard time saying I don't think it is ultimately effective. I still get the visual storytelling at the top. I made out what it was about. And it felt balanced to me, and that kind of thing. What about you?
I actually really like this, and I like that they presented us with both versions, because that definitely it helps to give us an understanding of how it's used. I think I read that camera shutter image or feel had been used for a couple years, so that's kind of a common theme for this workshop, at least for a few years.
Okay.
So
some more of almost a brand type of thing. It's identifiable, and it kind of carries you.
So I really like that they made that shutter, into a wave. I don't know that I would have thought of that, and that's a lot of fun. I like the colors. The colors are very California.
There's movement to it. I like it. There's just a visual movement.
It's got
storytelling's
some flow.
that way, you know. So
and I can definitely see in that circular top version, it feels like it all goes together and it all belongs there. We had seen a logo earlier that part of the text just felt like it
was separate.
And with this, I feel like it's all one piece.
That's what I was thinking too. On that design, this is the kind of feel like where it just tends to carry the flow, through a gestalt kind of a feel. And it just visually it connects, even though it's not a part of it. It just our eye will tend to connect the dots. So I like that as well. And the next question I may have is there, how much money is put into the region there for filming, in that? Because this is a visual storytelling workshop. So there may be some things involved with that as well. So it would play really well, if that was the case. It connects with everybody that's involved with things. So yeah.
I like, you can see the designer did give us both versions, so you can see they were very aware of what needs to be more like a logo, and then what can be a little bit more detailed, and how to differentiate and spread those things out. So that's a great eye for detail, and a great eye for production and knowing what you can and can't do with each of those.
You could take that bottom piece and it could be part of another poster for advertisement. You could put it as a banner on a website. It's multiple places. You could even probably put that on the bottom of a t-shirt. If you had a good print shop and just had the design at the bottom for the workshop, something that goes back with people after they are at a grab bag thing. Goodie bag stuff.
That's what I was thinking with the foresight to do that top version. It's a 3-color screen. So that's, that's great
Yeah.
that they had that in their heads to make sure there's a version that is going to work with all those different ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was cool. I liked it.
All right. Moving on.
The thing that stood out to me on this one, I know there's a lot of information, a lot of stuff to read through, and it's necessary on it. I like the timeline on the right. It gives you kind of like a sense of like, ping, 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 ping. This is how the development of this happened. Like, and it's separate. It didn't feel like it was trying to put it in to all the graphic, because if I had to read it in the text, I'd probably miss that. So I like the way they kind of pulled that information out and kind of put it for me on the side, because it's easy to assimilate. The benefits being the last thing, because we tend to kind of go left to right, top to bottom, was cool. It gives me some things I can leave with. I do have to read through that, so I might bold some of those benefits, keywords maybe. It's me. The thing that really stood out to me is the guy kind of looks happy. He's not like, I'm standing here for this picture. He's just like, hey, I'm a soldier. Here I am.
Airman.
Yeah, airman, sorry. And you have a thing that I thought was most effective, because it would be hard for me to kind of read the text and then decipher on the uniform what that was being talked about. I love the blow-ups. I like the fact that they brought that imagery up bigger so you can see it clear, and I didn't have to try to search for it. So I think for the viewer that would be pretty effective for that. So overall, I liked it. And those elements are probably the most powerful for me.
Rebecca?
I really like this one. It's hard to not only put information into graphics, but also to put maybe change or change in people's uniforms or lifestyle, which I'm sure can be a little bit jarring. To take that and put it into a piece that feels comfortable, it feels friendly. The colors are not throwing me off. They're nice and neutral.
They have a family. They fit together in a kind of a family.
Right.
So, yeah.
It feels everything here is clear. Like was said, I don't need to search around for it. I love those little blow-ups, blow-up images.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes it nice and easy on your reader. And I feel like I could get everything that I needed to know out of one page. Which is amazing, and that's also very hard to achieve. And I do like that this fine gentleman has a smile on his face. So it's the little details, that count.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, next.
This one it's simple. It had information on it. Like even looking at it on this screen though, I couldn't read that. Like on the, as far as the imagery is concerned, so the text is kind of thin and small. It goes with the theme of kind of a blueprint thing, but for graphic, we don't know what size, we don't know what it's being displayed on. Is it print, is it media, or electronic media, or something like that? So that would be a concern for me. I might maybe work with the font a little bit differently for the body of it. The larger text obviously stands out pretty well. And is there. The graphics of the plane are interesting to look at. The white kind of pulls me to the beginning, where I would kind of tend to start and moving across. Overall, it felt okay. I don't know if we need to necessarily play with flow or organization. It's really just those bodies of text that really would hinder me a bit. Yeah.
It feels like we took that blueprint feel and started to use it and just didn't take it far enough. Blueprints are not usually very clean. They have a lot of stuff on them, including the coffee mug ring.
Right, it's been worked a little bit.
And this, it almost just feels too clean to me. I'd like to see some variation in the font. Maybe, even some handwritten or something.
It's been interacted with, even if you have a scripted or a handwritten kind of font kind of thing, it feels like somebody's engaged it somehow.
Right.
Even if it's digital. So bringing that in, I agree with that for sure.
So it's, there's that line of it looks like a blueprint, and this I feel like there's a blueprint background. But I'm not sure that enough was really brought into that to make it convincing.
Okay. This is our last graphic, and it is an animated
Another
graphic.
animation. It reminds me of my school with the flying plane, you know. I thought this one was a little bit better, but then, you know, things like that, elements where it looks like the bombs are kind of coming out and they're pulling the text away and stuff. I think it's an attempt to have elements interact with one another, but it's kind of jarring. It just kind of happens, and by the time I realize what's going on, I've missed the text being pulled away, because the element that was making the transition was more dominant than what was trying to be achieved. So that's a hard to do. I love that kind of idea where it's in like 3/4 view, the propellers are turning. That gives me animation that's not jarring. What I was seeing more in this, and having the planes kind of moving around a bit, so they feel like there's some life to them, that is excellent. Transitions, though, on the other hand, that's a harder one to work with, but needs attention, because if you lose your viewer in the flow and you're not directing the viewer's eye appropriately for that, it doesn't matter. They're not going to get to the next thing. They're going to stop watching, or they're going to blink, or they're going to look away, or they're going to go, oh my God, or they're going to miss something, and then they feel like they missed out, and then you're defeated, you know. The type kind of coming in and stuff, like it looked like there was some anticipations there. They tried to kind of bring it this way and then push it out, but there just needs tweaking on it. And the rate that it goes out, it makes the text feel really noisy. You either have to pull it in and then make it go out and blur it so you don't get that noisiness. So it just becomes more of a swipe. You know, then it's kind of a graphic element that's kind of bleeding out. It's easier to like say, okay, I'm not supposed to pay attention to this anymore. But if it's still letters and it's moving like that, I feel like I'm supposed to still be reading it. But it's so noisy I can't decipher it. And then it becomes like, I don't want to look at this anymore. So that is important to kind of, those little tweaks like that will help the viewer more through it. But I thought this one felt like a little stronger as far as the animation was concerned. Still needs some help, but overall, relatively okay, yeah.
I agree. I did feel like this one was, it was a little bit stronger, easier for me to get through. I liked, you know, that consistent kind of color palette, those nice soft tones, just worked really well for me. You know, I'm going to agree it's not quite there yet, but definitely on its way.
It's a step in the right direction. You can tell that the person that was working on this has an idea or at least a basic understanding of those principles. They just need to explore them further to make it more effective. And it'll just push it into a more comfortable run, you know, for the viewer. You want it to be easy, you know, easy for people to get and follow and fun to watch and stuff. So the clouds floating by were nice. It's not dominant. It's not dominant. It's a slower pace than the other elements. We tend to watch things that are moving more than other things because our brain is kind of wired to do that. Things that move towards us or away from us are important. Things that are moving fastest are important to us. Color, shape, size, not as important. It's like I don't really care if it's pink or fuzzy or polka dotted. I just want to know if it's coming towards me or not. And I want to know how fast it's moving because it's a survival thing. It's a defensive thing. It's a fight or flight type of response. And so we're wired to see visually motion like that. So it's really important that motion is super important. And what is that telling us? If we can follow that, then we can make it pretty. We can put polka dots on it. We can make it fuzzy, you know, and all that kind of thing. But you really have to kind of establish that first. The design will come in, and you can always change the colors and things. Those elements are easier to change, I think, workload-wise than obviously tweaking the motion and making it flow right. So appropriate time in the appropriate place. and that'll push it into a better, I think, a more effective piece. So,
Rebecca, thoughts?
I like this. I think the movement was more subtle in this. I didn't feel like things were flying at me.
mm-hmm.
It definitely, that I did not get the vertigo feeling from this one. It's awesome. I liked the way that the words came and left. Some of it was a little iffy, a little clunky, but I did like this one quite a bit better. And I like the way that, the graphics here were simple, and kind of, you get that kind of infographics feel, but I'm not overwhelmed. I felt like I could understand the graphics and how everything worked together. So, yeah, I did appreciate this one quite a bit more.
Simpler is better.
Yes.
If it's not working, simplify, always. And 9 times out of 10, that will put you in a better place, and you can move forward from there. Or maybe you just, that's it, and you leave it alone. That's probably the hardest thing, I think, to do, is to know when to stop tinkering with something. You can like wreck a piece like really fast if you go one step too far. So I tend to retract that instead. If you're questioning taking that step, and it's like, no, simplify. What can I actually remove? And maybe it actually will put it in a better place. Yeah, for you and the viewer, ultimately. Right. Yeah.
Well, that wraps up our feedback session for Graphic Artist of the Year.
Yay.
I want to thank you guys so much, Craig, Rebecca, for joining here today. I know you took time off from work. I know you took time off from work and took a plane to get here.
Yeah, it was fun.
So we very, very much appreciate it, and thank you both.
Thank you.
Your feedback was fantastic. So
thank you so much. I appreciate
you.
it. Absolutely.
And join us tomorrow, 9 o'clock, same bat channel, same bat place, and we will be reviewing Photographer of the Year. So you're not going to want to miss it. See you tomorrow.